Energy and sustainability is a key aspect and a priority area at our university. Actually, right in this lecture hall yesterday, we had around the same number of people here discussing around energy dialogue, different new results from our researchers that hopefully will have effect on what is discussed today, the World Energy Outlook. And of course, we are part of shaping the future. And of course, we very much welcome State Secretary Hannes Carlborg and Dr. Fatih Birol from the International Energy Agency. And I start with giving the word to Hannes Carlborg, Secretary of State, Ministry of Industry. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, as the State Secretary at Näringsdepartementet, the Ministry of Enterprise, Energy and Communications, I'm very pleased to welcome you here today to this presentation, which is co-hosted by my ministry, by KTH, by the Swedish Energy Agency, and not least the IEA. Dr. Birol, it's a great pleasure to have you here again, 1 year later, with a new and fresh publication in your hand, the World Energy Outlook for 2012. A very warm welcome back to Sweden, and thank you for coming here every year, although I think that November is probably not the very best season to visit Stockholm. I understand it that this is the 5th year in a row that you come and visit us here, and to take part and present the launch of the World Energy Outlook. Of course, very much has happened on the global energy markets over the years, and still you and your team every year manage to come up with very new and interesting findings of very great value for us, the policymakers. The Swedish government is very keen to share these insights and to contribute to the dynamic and ongoing discussion on the future energy outlook. I believe that this year's report actually managed to attract even more attention than the previous one, also here in Sweden. This morning, you and my Minister Anna-Karin Hatt, met with the energy utilities, with the companies, to give presentations and to discuss the report. And now, just before lunch, I managed to listen a while to the discussion you had in a roundtable discussion hosted by the minister about energy efficiency and the transport sector. And now we are here at the KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology, to convey the key findings of the Energy Outlook to a new audience, a new set of important stakeholders here, diplomats, academics, government officials, and business representatives. I believe that the World Energy Outlook very successfully addresses the challenges facing the energy sector, and it does so in a very clear and straightforward way. So before I give you the floor, Dr. Birol, I would like to highlight some of the findings in the World Energy Outlook that I think deserve a special attention. Firstly, the energy efficiency, the special theme of the report this year. You say that the potential for energy efficiency in the economy is far from fully tapped. You demonstrate that there are multiple benefits of energy efficiency measures for the economy, for the environment, and as well for energy security. And you argue that with more stringent energy efficiency measures, the expected increase in global energy demand could actually be halved by 2035. So with the right incentives, measures for energy efficiency could also buy us time to avoid the rise in the average global temperature and stop it from exceeding the 2 degrees Celsius limit. And what is particularly interesting is that most of these technologies are not very new. They seem to be economically viable already today, and that they seem to have a relatively short payoff period. To unleash this potential, your message is that us, the policymakers, must take action to remove all the non-technical barriers and make it more favorable to make these solutions and to be developed and deployed into the market. This is especially challenging for us here in Sweden now, as we, together with other countries in the European Union, face the challenge of implementing the new Energy Efficiency Directive, a work we have just started at my ministry. So I look very much forward to hear more about this. The outlook also contains very interesting figures on the future energy prices. It repeats the findings of previous editions that we are heading for a future of higher oil prices. The report also analyzes the development of the non-conventional energy sources, such as shale oil and shale gas, which has gotten a lot of attention recently. And it also looks into the role of the Iraqi oil sector and the role it may have for the future. And a special interest for me and Minister Hatt is, of course, the role of renewable energy that also is analyzed in the report. And the findings show that we have a growing sector here. But I think that the outlook could have been much better if it hadn't been for the heavy subsidies of the fossil fuels that we have still in the world. And another new area interesting for us is the water energy nexus that is being investigated in the report, and that will be much more important in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will now see from Dr. Birol, his presentation, that the World Energy Outlook for 2012 offers us a raft of valuable findings and important insights that will be definitely deserve to be further explored and considered. So it is now my great pleasure to give you the floor, Dr. Birol. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to come back to Sweden 5 years in a row. And what I understood in these 5 years is that Swedes are hard workers and make you work very hard as well. This is my third presentation today since in the morning, and it's a great pleasure but to come to KTH, a very renowned university, and to share with you some of our key findings. But before I start my remarks, let me make 3 special thanks. The first thank goes to Madam Minister and the State Secretary for inviting me 5th time in a row to come and hear and share our views with the Swedish government, Swedish public universities, and others. Second one goes again to Sweden. Where is Bo? I don't see Bo Dikfalushi. He's here. So we have Bo Dikfalushi, a Swedish colleague with us, working 3 years, made a tremendous contribution to IEA, and he's coming back to Sweden. Thank you very much, Bo, for coming and working with us. The third one is, which I repeated since 2 years. As you may know, I am Turkish, and I am a great football fan. And my football team is a very famous team, at least for me it is famous, Galatasaray. And we have an excellent Swedish player, Johan Elmander. Thank you very much to all of you for sending Johan Elmander to us, who made us champion last year. He is not as well known as some of the other ones who live in Paris, but he's a team player. He's a very team spirit, and thank you very much for that. And Minister Hatt today gave me an excellent present. And I could have never imagined, after the second performance of the day, she, from a very nice envelope, she took off a T-shirt, Swedish national team's T-shirt, signed by Johan Elmander. So this was a great one, so thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. So I will have a great sympathy for the Swedish national team as long as Johan Elmander plays. So please don't forget it. So let's come to perhaps the energy part of our discussion. I will try to talk with you some of the key findings of our study. I know that we have colleagues here from the academia, from the embassies, from the distinguished ambassadors and the others. I will try to give you some general findings, and if you want to deepen some of them, I will be very happy to discuss those with you. Now, first of all, our main message here is that we believe what is happening today in the global energy markets indicate a shift in the foundations of the global energy system. And this shift is driven by three factors. One of them is some surprising countries are showing significant increase in oil and gas production. These countries are United States, Canada, and Iraq. We expect a significant increase from these countries in terms of oil and gas production, which changed some of the dynamics in the global energy markets. Second, in some countries after Fukushima, we see a retreat from nuclear power. Germany, followed by Switzerland, and Japan, very recently, a major nuclear country, announced that in the year 2030, they would like to see zero nuclear power in their energy mix. France, where I live, the French president, Mr. Hollande, reconfirmed what he said during the presidential campaign, and he would like to see share of nuclear power going down in the year 2025. And these changes, ladies and gentlemen, in the nuclear power will affect the other fuels, because if nuclear goes down, something has to go up in order to compensate the decline in nuclear power. It could be renewables, it could be natural gas, and others. Third, and something which is not very well known and appreciated, last year only, at least in 4 major economies, there are substantial legislations as far as the energy efficiency is concerned. We have in Europe, we have the European Energy Efficiency Directive. In China, there is a very strong target for energy intensity improvement in their 5-year plan, which is very important for Chinese policymaking. Third, in Japan, a substantial target for electricity savings, and also in the United States, new fuel efficiency standards for cars. We will see the impact of these efficiency policies very soon in the global energy mix, and I believe these 3 major issues, what is happening in oil and gas, nuclear power, and the efficiency will push the shift the global energy system. And I will tell you in a minute how it happens. Second, oil prices. When we talk about the high oil prices, the first number comes in our minds is the 2008 $147, which is definitely true, but it was only 1 day. When you look at this year, an average of the 2012, from 1st of January to up to today, the average oil prices this year, 2012, was the highest ever in the history, and as such, playing a rather negative role for the global economic recovery efforts, especially for the countries who are depending on oil imports substantially. Another important point is about the natural gas prices. Today, when you look at the natural gas prices in Europe are about 5 times higher than in the United States. In Asia, it is about 8 times higher than the United States. So there is a big difference in terms of natural gas prices in the United States and the rest of the world. And this is very important, as I will come in a minute. And only 5 years ago, 5 years, not very long, 5 years ago, the natural gas prices in these 3 regions were more or less the same, perhaps $1, $2 differences. And in 5 years of time, there is a huge difference between these 3 regions, providing United States a very competitive edge, especially for the US industry. Now, there are a couple of symptoms that we are, as a planet, not going in the right direction, which are highlighted in our work, as Mr. State Secretary highlighted. First of all, fossil fuels, which are the major cause of the carbon dioxide emissions, are supported through subsidies in many countries in the world. On one hand, we want to reduce the CO2 emissions and see an increase in the renewables. On the other hand, in many emerging countries, we put subsidies for fossil fuels. According to our calculations, these subsidies mean to give a price, to give an award to every ton of CO2 emitted, and award about $110. So there's an incentive of $110 per CO2 as a result of fossil fuel subsidies, which encourages the use of fossil fuels. And, of course, as a result of all these developments, last year, what we have seen is the carbon dioxide emissions, a major greenhouse gas, increase by 1 full gigaton, and bringing us surely to a point of no return in terms of climate change, whereas renewable energies, energy source, which should help us to address the climate change and help us to improve the energy security, renewable energy industry is more and more under pressure for several reasons. After 10 years of a growth, renewable energy investments, for the first time this year, 2012, is going to show a decline. There will be a decline in the renewable energy investments worldwide, which is definitely a bad news. Now, some of you who may be following the World Energy Outlook since some time know that since 10 years, continuously and stubbornly, we are looking at an issue, namely energy and the poor. Today, according to our analysis, 1.3 billion people, about 20% of the global population, has no access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And this is not only a statistics, ladies and gentlemen. This is a real life. The day finishes for them much earlier than for us. A mother cannot keep the medication for her child in the refrigerator. You don't have access to the external world. So energy access is a major issue, and according to our projections, 1.3 billion people who have no access to electricity today, despite the growth in the economy in the next 20 years, despite all these international efforts, 20 years from now, there will be still 1 billion people who would have no access to electricity if we do not have a concerted, definite efforts worldwide. And I believe this is not only an economic issue, not an energy issue, but maybe beyond those, this is a moral issue. Finally, as Mr. State Secretary mentioned, we look at water issue this year for the first time. What we say is that energy production needs more and more water for electricity generation, but also for the biofuels and also fossil fuels. And the demand for water for energy production is increasing substantially. And therefore, water is becoming a critical factor in assessing the economic and technological viability of major energy projects. When we look at in the future energy projects, we will look at, in addition to cost and this and that, whether or not there is enough water for this production. Now, let me now look at a bit the future and the global energy use. What we see here is that only mid-1970s, the OECD countries, the countries who are the members of the International Energy Agency, the organization I am representing here, were using about 2/3 of the global energy. And very soon, their share will go down to only 1/3 of the global energy. And this means that the people in developing nations, mainly in China, India, and Middle East, They want to have better lives, and one of the ways to go to better lives is having more energy. Energy means better lives, modern lives, and convenience for your life. So, and the message is very clear. The center of gravity of the global energy system is moving from west to east slowly but surely. The new center of gravity will be very soon east, not anymore west. A bit discussion on the United States, what is going on there. In the United States, in the last few years, we have been seeing a major decline in United States oil production. But as a result of a new technology developed there, we have seen a growth coming from an unconventional oil, replacing the decline in the conventional oil. And we expect, as a result of these developments, United States, in 5 years of time, will overtake Saudi Arabia as the largest oil producer of the world. A development that we have, it is difficult to imagine a few years ago. In terms of natural gas, the same story. Natural gas production was going down years and years in the United States, and with the similar technology, we have seen the unconventional gas, so-called shale gas developments, meant US gas production is increasing. And we expect around 2015, United States will produce more natural gas than Russia, becoming the largest natural gas producer of the world. So this is the happening in the United States, and given the size of the United States economy and the energy markets, this will have implications for everybody very quickly. One of the implications is the US and Middle East oil trade. Colleagues who follow the US politics, even the recent presidential campaign, know that one of the major discussions in the United States is the US oil import dependency from Middle East, which was until recently a significant chunk of US oil imports coming from the Middle East. But we expect, with the production growth coming from the United States, US very soon may not need to import any oil from Middle East anymore. And this will have major implications, I believe, for the international oil markets and maybe beyond that. And when we look at the Middle East, which is and will remain the most important region in terms of global oil production, until recently, half of the Middle East oil was going to West, half of it was going to Asia. But we think that this trend will change significantly, and very soon, about 90% of Middle East oil will go to Asia and 10% to the rest. So this is definitely a trend which will have implications not only for the trade, but also foreign policy and others. A key country we look into this year's outlook is Iraq. Iraq produces today about 3 million barrels per day, and we think it can double easily to 6 million barrels per day in the year 2020 and increase further. This projection is much lower than those of the Iraqi government, and many institutions work on Iraq. And in terms of the trade, we see that the Iraq today exporting half of it is oil to Asia, the other half to the rest of the world will change, and a big portion of the Iraqi oil will go to Asia, mainly to China. the China will be the premier destination. And the same goes the other way around. The production growth in Iraq, about 30% of that growth will come from oil fields, which are either directly owned by Chinese companies or Chinese companies together with other companies. So there will be a new trade axis built, which I call B2B, Baghdad to Beijing trade axis. And there will be, I am sure, lots of consequences of that new trade axis. Natural gas markets. There is a huge transformation in the natural gas markets, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. State Secretary mentioned that I am coming since 5 years here, and 4 years ago, I remember very well, I was in one of the rooms of the Minister of Energy, and I said that there is a silent revolution taking place in the United States about the natural gas. And our prediction at that time was spot on. And not only that, the revolution became loud, and it is beyond the United States now. The shale gas is coming from US, Canada, Australia, and maybe soon from China. And this shale gas, the new unconventional gas, is changing the many dynamics in the natural gas markets. This is the natural gas trade today, and driven by the traditional exporters. And as a result of new producers coming in the picture, it will be much more complex in the next years to come. This is definitely a bad news for the traditional gas exporters. They are going to lose for 2 reasons. One, in terms of volumes, amount of gas they are going to export, it will be lower, because there are other producers, they also produce gas, and some of their potential clients, they themselves produce gas. They don't need much gas to import. This is one. Second, until recently, the natural gas prices in many countries, especially in Europe and Asia, were indexed to oil prices. When oil prices went up, gas prices went up as well. But this new situation provides additional new cards in the hands of the consumers, importers, to negotiate with the traditional gas exporters in terms of pricing. So the shale gas revolution, new gas coming from other countries, not only 1 or 2 traditional exporters, made the hands of the importers much stronger in their negotiations with the traditional gas exporters. And as such, it is a major change. It is one of the major legs of the new global energy foundation. Now, energy security. We have many colleagues here from the foreign services, and they know better than me that the energy security and foreign policy are more and more interwoven. And this is especially so for key economies. For example, China. Last week, there was the Chinese Communist Party Congress, and energy security was one of the top items discussed there, as we all know. And for China, for example, China imports today about 15% of it is gas, and about 50% of it is oil. And this is a major concern for China, because when you are so much relying on oil and gas imports, when the prices go up, international prices, your economy is affected. Or your foreign policy is a victim of you relying on other sources. Therefore, energy security is important, and the reliance on other countries is a major concern for many. And when we look at the future, as we did in our World Energy Outlook, we see that the reliance on other countries of major key economies is increasing. China increasing both oil and gas, India, Europe. Japan doesn't increase because it cannot increase more than 100%, it's already there. But there is one country, ladies and gentlemen, which goes the other direction, which is the United States. US becomes a gas exporter, and oil imports go to a very low level. And this is a major shift in the US energy system and therefore in the global energy system. Mr. Secretary was right. When our book was published, there was a lot of press coverage, and main thing they were picking was that the US is going through self-sufficiency in terms of energy. But how they cover our story was not exactly right. Because what they say is that as a result of increase in the oil production, US is going to be self-sufficient very soon. This is one part of the story. The other part of the story is what brings the US to self-sufficiency or the oil imports to decline. Not only the increase in the oil production I showed you a minute ago, but at the same time, the first Obama administration has successfully and finally introduced fuel efficiency standard for cars. It means American cars will use less oil in the future per kilometer than they did in the past. Still less efficient than the Japanese or European cars, but the efficiency button, putting the efficiency button, the US administration had put a downward pressure on the US oil consumption. Putting these two things together, higher domestic production and lower domestic consumption means lower oil import needs. This shows you that the efficiency policies can help us, among other things, reducing the oil import dependency, reducing the dependency on other countries' exports. A few things about the electricity generation. I know that the KTH has an excellent reputation in terms of technology, and I thought I should share with you what is happening on the electricity generation technologies. In Japan, basically, nuclear is out. We see renewables and natural gas growing. And Europe, again, renewables are growing strongly, mainly as a result of the subsidies which is given to renewable energies. And coal is out. United States, again, shale gas, I mentioned to you, the unconventional gas is continuing to penetrate the market, and coal goes out, and the renewables continue to grow. India, a huge growth from India. And this number is huge. And if there was no China, India would be China, because it's so big, the numbers coming from India. And India is becoming, in 10 years of time, less than 10 years of time, the largest coal importer of the world. Huge growth in the electricity generation. But there is one number I thought I should share with you to put the things in a context, because we have a lot of colleagues, the students here, I think, who would need to understand the things, not only in terms of energy, but in terms of the economic, general economic policy and the issue of inequality. You see that the India electricity generation grows strongly here. And in the year 2035, however, amount of electricity consumed in India on a per capita basis, how much electricity one Indian citizen consumes in 2035, will be equal to the per capita electricity consumption, average electricity consumption of an American in the year 1947. So there is 100 years of a gap still after so many years between the rich and the poor. And this is definitely something we need to take into account when we discuss the climate change issues, other energy issues. There is a gap, and there will be a gap between rich and poor. Therefore, the responsibilities need to be assessed accordingly. And of course, there is China. China numbers are huge. When you look at this, China is growing amazingly. And China, just to give you these numbers put in a context, as I said, we have many colleagues from different sectors. China, in the next 20 years, China electricity capacity will increase, this increase, will increase equal to the current capacity of United States plus Japan. So China will add to its capacity 1 US plus 1 Japan in the next 20 years. They will build 1 US and 1 Japan. So this will definitely affect all of us. What kind of technologies China will choose? If they go for solar, wind, nuclear power, through different technology effects, reduction in the cost, learning by doing, many of you know much better than me, it will have major effects on the global energy system. So therefore, we need to keep an eye on China to understand what is happening in the markets. I hope we don't have anybody from today from the Commission, because I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want them to hear. Let me tell you something just a bit in an extreme case, but please try to understand what I mean. Swedish energy system, what is happening in Sweden energy system, in the future will be more determined what the Chinese government will decide for Chinese markets than what the colleagues decide in Brussels through different price linkages. I want to give you one example. Beginning of this year, Chinese premier gave a speech in Abu Dhabi, where I also was attending, and he said he talked about the achievements of China in an excellent speech. One of the things he said is that, as you know, dear colleagues, he said, we have many inefficient coal mines. And I decided that those coal mines, which lead to lots of accidents of many coal miners' deaths, I decided to close them down. They are tiny coal mines for the safety reasons. And this is definitely a very well justified decision. Very good for China. Now, second step. What happens as a result of that? This small production of coal lost in China because of closing down of these mines, China had to import this coal from the international markets, which is very small for Chinese standards. Perhaps Chinese even didn't notice that they import, it's about 3%. But for the global coal markets, it is so big that the coal prices increase from $90 to $120 as a result of a decision taken in China just to provide safety in the Chinese coal sector, which is a completely different intention. And we will see these things more and more in the future, and it may be directly or indirectly affecting the entire energy system. Now, I mentioned to you what is the change in the global energy system, what are the shifting dynamics, what is happening in the United States, Iraq, Canada, and elsewhere in terms of oil and gas. And this has two major implications. One on the geopolitical side, which is not my professional mandate, and there are many colleagues from the embassies here, they know much better than me. But the other one is on the economic side. One of the indicators of that is the electricity prices. we expect a growing divergence of the electricity prices in different countries. In Europe, for example, we think electricity prices will be at least 50% higher than the United States and 3 times higher than in China. And this has implications, of course. The first implication is that the competitiveness of the European industries will be negatively affected vis-à-vis their rivals in the United States and in China. And this is only the electricity prices I'm showing to you. Natural gas prices, I mentioned in the beginning that there is already a big difference as well. Second, European consumers are going to pay more from their budget, family budget, for energy than the citizens in China or in the United States. Why we have higher in Europe electricity prices? A couple of reasons. One, natural gas, which is a major input for electricity generation, as I mentioned, much more expensive in Europe compared to US, for example. Second, the phasing out of nuclear power in many countries, which I personally think was not a wise step, but I understand the country's points there, the political points there, but what it leads us to do is that the nuclear power plants, which were generating electricity with lower prices, are out of the system, and they are replaced more and more by higher energy sources. This is the second reason. Higher gas prices as an input and less nuclear power. Third, we have in Europe a price for carbon. And we will have it in the future as well. And other countries don't. This provides, of course, another discrepancy. And finally, in many countries, we put subsidies for renewable energies, which in many cases help to increase the electricity prices. And as a result of that, in Europe, we have substantially higher electricity prices vis-à-vis United States and China. And it wouldn't be a surprise to see, in fact, we already see some examples, that some heavy industries in Europe are looking for opportunities to move, to leave Europe, to go somewhere else in order to have lower energy costs as an input for their production, which is definitely not a good news. Now, the second issue today I wanted to share with you, as Mr. Secretary mentioned, energy efficiency. Every year in our outlook, we focus on a fuel. 1 year coal, 1 year oil, 1 year nuclear, renewables, and the others. And this year, we focus on energy efficiency as a fuel. And we look at country by country, sector by sector, how much potential is there in order to improve efficiency on an economic basis. Please, I underline this, economic basis. And when we look at the picture, we see that today, when we look at all the sectors globally, about 2/3 of the economically available potential of energy efficiency is not used and will not be used, even with the policies I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, what is happening in Europe, China, Japan, and the United States. Huge potential. Huge potential. The day before yesterday, I was in Oslo, in Norway, in a similar meeting like this with the Norwegian minister and the CEO of a Norwegian biggest oil company. And I asked the CEO, what would you do if you had an oil field which produces oil in a very, very lucrative terms, and you use only 1/3 of this oil, and 2/3 is left under the ground, even though it could make huge money for the company. And he said, I would fire the reservoir engineer. And here in this picture, I don't know whom to fire. But we have to fire somebody, and don't look at the governments so much, because Sweden is one of the good examples. Sweden, Denmark, Japan, they are good examples. But if you look at globally, I believe energy efficiency policies is an epic failure of the international energy policy making, because we failed when you look at that picture. So what we have done is we look at every country, every sector, and we said, what happens if in comparison with our central scenario, if there was an aggressive push of the governments to make more use of energy efficiency, and if all economically viable efficiency policies are used. And what is economically viable means? It means the following, that the investments you make as a consumer by purchasing more efficient technologies. For example, you go to a shop, you want to buy a television set. There are 2 television sets, the same quality, everything is the same. In one of them, it is a bit more expensive, 10 euros more expensive, but more efficient. The other one is 10 euros cheaper, but less efficient. Now, why should I go as a consumer to buy the more expensive one to give 10 euros more? We assumed in our work that thanks to government efforts, consumers, it can be efforts in terms of tax breaks, in terms of loans, go on buy the more efficient television sets, cars, buildings, and this would be payback within 5 years of time. So 5 years of payback period. If those policies are pushed, what happens? What happens is, ladies and gentlemen, we use less energy with the same comfort, same lifestyle, and we save a lot of coal, oil, gas, and other fuels. So the global energy demand growth is much lower, and which is a very good news for energy security. So this is the first goal that the energy efficiency, our so-called efficient world scenario scores, good for energy security efficiency policies. Second, since you import less oil, less gas, prices will go down, and the current account deficit will go down, and your economy will be also positively affected. Because in the very first picture I showed to you, you might have noticed that it is when you look at different sectors, industry, transport, buildings, etc., it was the industry sector which made the most of the potential. Why? With all respect to all the industry colleagues here, industry sector has one major single objective: to make money. And they see a business case, money-making case, to use energy more efficiently. As a result of those, industry, buildings, and everywhere, we see that the GDP, the economic growth, will be positively affected from using energy more efficiently. So this is the second goal that the energy efficiency can achieve. The third point is on climate change. When you look at our numbers, which we do, the carbon dioxide emissions, which is the most dangerous fuel in terms of the climate change, we are worldwide, with the current policies, perfectly on track for a temperature increase almost 6 degrees Celsius in the next decades to come. And 6 degrees increase in the global temperature means it would have devastating effects for all of us, for our children, grandchildren, next generations. We will see much more frequent extreme weather conditions. The immigration will be a major issue. sea level rise, the number of species disappearing from the world, many, many things, and I am sure there are many colleagues here who knows these issues much better than me. And this 6 degrees is a trajectory that we are following since a long time, and every year in the World Energy Outlook we make a tick. Yes, we are following this unsustainable trend. And the world leaders came together last year and agreed on the basis of the United Nations scientists' recommendation, try to keep the temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius. This is a good news that there is an intention there, but no yet legally binding agreement. And I can tell you that as somebody who spends half of his life in visiting other countries in the world, the appetite to find a solution for climate change is fading away, going down, unfortunately. Other concerns are preoccupying the minds of the governments and of the public. So, then we said, okay, this is the 2 degrees trajectory, and this is the amount of emissions we can emit the most in order to stay under the 2 degrees level. And so that we have a life which is similar, more or less, to our life of today. Not even exactly the same life, by the way. Even 2 degrees is a bit of a risky one. We could have a life more or less similar to this one. And we said, where are we today? Do we have still some chance? What is the room of maneuver left? So we made the following analysis. We said, let's assume, as of this year, 2012, until 2035, more than 20 years of time, there will be no new power plant built in the world, an assumption. No new cars come in the street. No new factories are founded. From the existing infrastructure, from the power plants, factories, cars we have today, as of today, how much emissions will come, and how do they compare with the emissions which are allowed us to stay under 2 degrees, to stay, where is our infrastructure today? What is the room of maneuver? And our findings are frightening. What it says is that even if we do not build any new power plants, 20 years, which is, of course, completely nonsense. It is building all the time. New cars are coming in the streets. New factories are built, and the room of maneuver from the existing ones already eat up about 80% of the emissions which are allowed us to stay under 2 degrees without building anything new, 80%. And we do not have an international legally binding agreement. We had the chance, we were close to that in Copenhagen, and after the disappointment in Copenhagen and failure of Copenhagen, now the chances are fading away. And if we do not have an agreement very soon on climate change, if the investments go in line with the business as usual, we will be having around the year 2017, this room of maneuver, which is given to us, will be closed, and closed forever. So then it is better to see how we are going to live in a climate, in a planet, which is very different than we used to live. And the time is very little. This is definitely very disappointing, at least we think so. And when I look at around, I don't see anybody pushing the climate change debate strongly in terms of governments. And we said, what can we do? And then we thought one policy option, energy policy option, which doesn't need an international legally binding agreement that every country says, I am going to reduce this much, this much, this much, and bind itself. One policy option we have is energy efficiency. If the countries would push the energy efficiency button as I just showed you in the previous slides, and go for the so-called our energy efficient world scenario, which means make use of their potential, the door which is going to be closed in 2017 can be left open 5 more years. So we can gain 5 precious years as a result of energy efficiency efforts. And why precious these 5 years? At least for 2 reasons. One, because the mood, which is not very much pro-climate change fight, may well change. The political debate may change. This is one. And there can be a new push as we head before the Copenhagen, internationally. Second, there are some technologies on the demand side, especially, can become much more mature and economically viable in these 5 years of time and can help us to address the climate change. So I mentioned to you that energy efficiency can help us for energy security, good news for energy security, good news for the economy, and again, we believe good news to address climate change. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me try to put my thoughts together and finish my presentation. Now, energy issues are becoming more and more complex. And the State Secretary just left because of this, perhaps. It is getting more and more complex and more jobs for the governments to do. And some policies which may be good for energy may not be good news for economy or environment. So we have to make sure that the governments take the energy policies in consideration of environment and economics and find a consistency between these 3 major objectives. So energy is not anymore only energy and beyond that. Second, I share with you the changes, what is happening in the United States, in Iraq, and in Canada, and we believe that these changes may well redefine different countries' economic position in the global economic landscape, and at the same time, it may well change the geopolitical balances among the countries. Third, Iraq, we believe, is going to play a more and more crucial role in terms of global oil markets. Fourth, climate change. Climate change is sliding down in the policy radar, as I mentioned to you. And the problem is, the later we try to fix the climate problem, because of we lock in the infrastructure of energy, the more expensive will be the solution. And the more expensive it will be, the more difficult it will be to have an agreement among the countries who is going to do how much. So our likelihood to find a solution for climate change is also declining by time. And it is the very reason we believe there is a need to push the climate change again high in the agenda. And as I announced this morning, June next year, we are going to make a special report of the World Energy Outlook on climate change in order to try to give a new momentum of climate change in the international policy agenda. And I promise Minister Hart to come over again to Sweden to present the result of that climate study. Finally, I try to highlight you that the energy efficiency, using energy more efficiently, can bring benefits in terms of energy security, can bring benefits in terms of economy, and can also help us to address the climate change problem. Beginning of my presentation, I told you that a couple of years ago, we have diagnosed unconventional energy revolution in terms of natural gas. And it became true. And now I dare to highlight in front of you another unconventional energy revolution. But this is not a prediction, this is a hope. We may well see another unconventional energy revolution, but this time not on oil and gas, but energy efficiency may well be a key priority for many countries as the economic obligations, as the climate obligations may push them, and we are, in the next months to come, going to go all the governments and bank on them to put the energy efficiency policies in place. And my hope is that the next unconventional energy revolution will be on the energy efficiency front. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatih Birol. It was really exciting to listen to you, and it's exciting how you could condense the 300 pages into this presentation. I think it was really exciting to listen to you. And it's also has a nice relation to the discussion we had yesterday, where we had a Vattenfall Energy Award to a Master of Science student at KTH, who had made a study on the cement factory, where it could show that you could increase efficiency by a factor 50%.
Perfect.
So, but on the other hand, let me also take we have some time for a few questions, and being the chairman, let me maybe pose the first question I was, while listening to, thinking about is exactly this issue, that on one hand, we have an economic crisis in Europe with a high amount of unemployment and a huge issue of loans and financial insecurity. On the other hand, you point, to the necessity of changing the energy system.
Yes.
And yourself, being economist, what are the magic of the market that could drive that change, besides asking the politicians? So what would be your idea to make it economic interest of putting the incentive in place in the market to both generate the jobs that will make our economy more efficient and also long run much more competitive?
So this is a very good question. Thank you very much. I don't know who told you to ask me this question, but this is a very tough one. But this is a very good one, because this is the question of the day. In fact, this is what all of our book is all about. Let me try to explain you. Now, you are completely right. We are going through a financial crisis now, and what we need is jobs, first of all, and the economic growth. These are the two things we need. And when I look at the different options in the countries which are not as lucky as Iraq or United States and the others, and most of the countries are not lucky in that respect, to me, energy efficiency is the key word. For example, in Europe, we have calculated that in Europe, if Europe would push the energy efficiency button, especially in the three areas: one, refurbishment of the existing building stock; second, the new lines, more efficient lines in the car manufacturing; and the third one you just mentioned, in the heavy energy industrial sector, such as cement and aluminium. If the economically viable options would be pushed, European GDP would benefit more than 1 percentage point additional growth. And how will it happen? To be honest with you, I believe the market instruments a lot, and markets are the best instruments which runs the energy sector. But to push the button, we need here public policies, government policies. Governments should find the different type of financial instruments to give different loans or tax systems or subsidies to make the consumers to make the steps in terms of more efficient choices, which are, in many cases, require a bit higher upfront costs. But if the governments come in the picture, help the consumers, if governments give of the 10 euro more expensive television, if it gives me a tax break there, and if I buy it, if the electricity bill is lower, if the government's countries' oil and gas imports will be lower, everybody will win. But to do that, governments have to get organized in a different way. Because efficiency policies are different than other energy policies. If you build an electricity plant, you know how to do it. You go to one ministry, you do this and that. But efficiency policies, you need energy ministries, you need finance ministries, you need the construction ministries, you need the industry ministry, transportation, all of them. So they need to get organized in a different way and to have the financial policies, energy policies in a way to push the consumers to go for more efficient policies, which at the end of the day will generate new jobs, help the economy to grow, and which should be also good for the climate change.
Kind of CO2 tax, or?
It can be CO2 tax, it can be on giving loans for the people who are going to refurbish their apartments, it can be different type of subsidies and different type of financial instruments depending on the country and country's context. Yes.
Okay, I give now the floor to the floor. I see. I start with Mark.
Mark Howells, I'm head of the Division of Energy Systems Analysis here. Just one second of advertisement. We helped the UN write a book on policies and measures for energy efficiency inside of industry. But my question to you revolves around Europe's vulnerability as we see these geopolitics shift. For better or worse, the United States has had a heavy military presence in the Middle East, and as we see perhaps US oil-related interests in the region reducing, I imagine that there will be new tensions perhaps playing out between India and China. Europe is one of the regions that has very little local resource. How do you see its role and engagement with the Middle East playing out? And do you see this being perhaps something that will thrust energy efficiency even further into the spotlight, not just to mitigate CO2? Thank you. And thank you very much for the excellent presentation.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I get a couple of questions and answer all of them?
Better we take
one by one, okay. And just that you know, I have a flight to catch. So my colleague is over there looking at me with sharp eyes. So, okay, yes. So, now, this is an excellent question, by the way. But one part of the question I will not be able to answer. I'm very sorry for that. I am an energy professional and I have my views about the geopolitics and so on. But I can tell you that the geopolitical changes tend to follow the economic changes with a 5 years or so time lag. So what happens there may have implications a bit later. But you are spot on. The very fact that the geopolitics and energy security becomes more of a crucial and critical subject for the countries would provide an additional incentive for the energy efficiency measures, and I completely agree with you. It will be, but I'm very sorry to be pessimistic about Europe, but it will be mainly, I believe, come from China, India, and hopefully from Europe, because these are the 3 regions which will be very much vulnerable to the developments in that region of the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kjell Ahlqvist, Uppsala University. Thank you very much for a nice presentation. We know each other since many years back, you know. And the story that has reached the press mostly is about the increase of oil production, especially in the United States.
Exactly.
And also the change that you have during the year ahead about the crude oil production is going down now and becoming closer together, you know. But the thing is that the part of the oil production is natural gas liquids, you know.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a big problem because that has to do with the production of natural gas. And also another thing that I don't understand is that the International Energy Agency are using the barrel of natural gas liquids and not the energy content of the natural liquid as they do in the United States. So if we do that instead, there is not so much increase in US, so they will overtake Saudi Arabia's role. And that's also something that should be discussed. You know, on Monday, you had an interview with Science about the report about the oil, and the next minute when he closed he called me because he liked to have my opinion about the report, and it will be instant to see what comes out. But again, the scenarios are changed dramatically. For instance, discoveries of production from the oil fields that not yet have been discovered went down with 6 million barrels in 1 year.
So your question more or less is that you doubt the increase of the oil production in the United States. Yeah, so that's your question, okay?
Yes.
Comment.
One of the things what you said is completely right, that we know each other since long time. So this is what completely right. And since long time, you kindly said that we are going to run out of oil. We are not. But this doesn't mean that everything is picobello. Let me tell you the following. The oil fields are like human beings. When they are young, they are very productive and they produce a lot of oil. And then they come to a certain maturity level, and then they start to decline. And many of the oil fields today in the world are in a decline. So we have to increase the production, global oil production, not only to meet the demand of oil coming from China, India, and the others, but also, as Mr. Alekret said, also to compensate the decline in the existing fields. So if we have to produce 4 barrels of oil in the next 20 years to come, 3 barrels are needed in order to compensate the decline in these old fields, and 1 barrel is needed in order to meet the oil demand growth, highlighting the importance of decline. Coming back to the United States. Now, this is evidence. In the United States, US increased the production about 700,000 barrels per day in the last 4 years. Will it continue? To me, it will continue as long as the prices remain high enough. The production in the United States in this unconventional oil is not a cheap business because there are very significant decline rates there. So I'm going too much technical, sorry for that. But for example, to produce 1 barrel of oil in Iraq is substantially cheaper than in the United States. In order to maintain that production growth in the United States, we need prices about $75, $80. If the prices were to go down, we would see a significant growth not coming. But our expectation is prices will remain high, provide incentives for the United States production to grow. In terms of NGL, just 1 point, we have the energy content conversions, and it is all there and documented in a transparent manner. Perfect.
Okay, I think
one more question I can take, and I really have to go because my colleague is even walking downstairs now. So I
think
yes.
we draw a line here. I
Perfect.
think
Thank you very
much for coming. I heard you got a T-shirt on Elmander, so I give you KTH tie.
Oh, thank you very much.
So please, thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. With great pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.